we're going to look at what the Bible has to say about money. What did Jesus say on money? And this last week, we took a group of people here from Life Church, and we went and we walked through a 3-hour experience called the Cost of Poverty experience. And it was 3 hours where you're given a scenario and you're given a card and someone's story, someone's family story. And you had to crawl into their skin and you had to crawl into their story and you had to walk through a month in their life. And it was an eye-opening experience for us and perhaps for you if you've ever had a chance to walk through the Cost of Poverty experience put on by Unite Dallas. And what an incredible conversation regarding the topic of poverty, which is all over our world today. In fact, today, there are more people living in poverty in America today than at any other time in human history. And to understand what poverty is and what poverty causes, and to realize the depth of it and the despair of it. And so what do we do when it comes to poverty, and what do we do even when it comes to money? And that's what I want to take the next few weeks to walk through, because I think money creates a lot of tension, problems. Raise your hand. Well, maybe not. Let's not do that. But think of it rhetorically. Has money ever caused tension in your home? Have you ever had an argument or a fight about money? Have you ever had bills that you didn't have enough money to pay? See, I think money is this topic that a lot of us don't want to touch or don't want to talk about, yet Jesus talks more about money than he does about heaven or hell. Just if you're taking notes, I want you to take notes today and throughout this series because I think it's going to help you. Understand the fact that Jesus talks more about money than he does about heaven or hell in all of his ministry. Why? Because you and I spend more time thinking about money than we do thinking about heaven or hell. We spend more money thinking about how am I going to get it, how am I going to save it, how am I going to spend it, how am I going to invest it. We spend more time thinking about money, unfortunately, than we do about heaven or hell. And so Jesus has a lot to say on money, and that's what we're going to take the next few weeks to really unpack. Jesus told parables. He taught in parables. Parables are stories. Over half of the parables Jesus told deal with money or material possessions. And so there's a lot of content in the Bible, and today, really, probably, you're going to hear more teaching than preaching today. And so I want you to get your notes out. If you've ever taken notes before, today's a good day to take notes. If you've never started, today's a good day to start. Because what we're going to give you today are some financial laws found in the Bible. These are biblical financial laws that Jesus sets up today. And we're going to look at the story called the parable of the talents in Matthew chapter 25. So go ahead and open your Bibles to Matthew chapter 25. Matthew chapter 25. And this is called the parable of the talents. And before we get started reading the story, I want you to understand something about talents when it says the parable of the talents. A talent was actually a measurement of money. We'll talk a little bit more about it in a little bit. But when you see the heading, Parable of the Talents, it's not necessarily talking about your natural talents or your gifts or your abilities. This is actually a story about money management. And so we're going to start with verse 14, and Jesus tells this story of a guy who's very, very, very rich, and he says, I'm going to go away on a trip, I'm going to go away for a long time, and he divides up his wealth, and he gives it to 3 of the people who work for him. The Bible calls them servants, and so he gives his money to 3 of the people who work for him. He says, here, I'm entrusting you to this, invest it wisely. When I come back, you can tell me what you did with it. And so 2 of the guys, when he comes back, have a good report, and one of them has a pretty bad report. And then Jesus simply pulls out some spiritual truths from this story that he tells. So out of this story, we learn several financial laws found in the Bible. So take notes, because today is a foundation you can build your life on when it comes to how does Scripture and how does Jesus tell me to handle money. So let's look at it together. Matthew chapter 25, we're going to start with verse 14. And it says in verse 14, For it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted to them his property. Let's just pause right there. If you have your Bible, if you're taking notes, what I want you to circle, what I want you to write down is whose money it is. He says he entrusted his property to them. So when we're talking about money here, whose money is it? Is it the master's money or is it the servant's money? If you answered the master's money, then ding, 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 you got it right. It's the master's money. He entrusted to them, the servants, the master's, his money. It's the master's money, but he's giving it to the servants to take care of. So that picture of somebody owning it, but entrusting it to somebody else to use is what we call stewardship. You've probably heard that word at church before, stewardship. You can write that down if you want to. Stewardship is an old English word that basically describes manager. So any of you who are managers, if you're in management in work, if you're in management in your company, if you manage resources, you manage inventory, you manage people, if you are in management, then you're a steward. A steward doesn't own, a steward manages. And you and I, we're called to steward. We're called to be stewards of our time. Write that down. We're called to be stewards of our time. We're called to be stewards of our influence. That's a big one right there. You and I, we're called to be stewards of our influence. We're called to be stewards of our opportunities. Everything you have, you are to be a steward or a manager of. And so here it says, he entrusted his property to the servants. And this is the first financial law of the Bible. Write this down. Here's our first law we're going to talk about today. It's the law of possession. The law of possession. It means everything I have belongs to God. And this is perhaps the hardest one for us to wrap our minds around. Everything I have belongs to God. So just so we're up front here, I want us to understand it's not my money, it belongs to God. And it's not your money, it belongs to God. And that's where we so often end up having the problem, so often where we end up getting offended when somebody at church talks about money. It's why we get offended when the government talks about money. It's when we get offended when our spouse talks about money. We just simply get offended when somebody has a different way of doing money than the way that we do money, and the way we do money got ourselves in problems. But if we can begin to understand from the very foundational level, God owns it all. He doesn't own the tithe. He owns the 100%. God owns it all. It all belongs to God. And I know maybe you're like wanting to say, well, wait a minute. I'm the one who worked for it. True. But who do you think gave you the job? Who do you think gave you the wisdom to do the job? Who do you think gave you the energy to do the job? Who do you think opened the doors for you to get the job? Who even put you here on this earth? See, everything you have is a gift from God, so you don't really own anything. It's all on loan. God loaned it to you. You didn't bring anything into the world. I've been there for the birth of all 4 of my sons, mostly. One of them I almost missed. It was the week before we're supposed to move into our first permanent building, and I was hanging screens on the wall, and Renee said, I'm going to the hospital, I'm in labor. I said, well, call me if they keep you. And, by that time, it's the third baby. It's like you kind of, know what's happening. And so she calls later on and goes, this baby's coming out. You better get here. So I made it just in time. I put on my catcher's mitt, and I was there ready. I'll tell you, I was there for all 4 of my babies' birth, and none of them came with a suitcase full of money. I wish they would have. But you didn't bring anything into this world. And as a pastor, I've been there on the other end many times at a funeral. You didn't bring anything into this world, and you're not taking anything with you out of this world. Nobody takes it with them. So the money that God loans to you and trusts to you, gives to you to steward, it's on loan to you to use during your lifetime. God loaned it to somebody else before you. God loaned it to you now, and God's going to loan it to somebody else later. You don't own it. It's all under management. You happen to be the new management for your 30 or 40 or 50 or 80 years that God entrusts you with the resources. The master owns it all. God is the owner. Now, it's important that we understand this because we tend to forget who owns the money. You know what a sign is? That demonstrates or that reminds you or that shows you that you forgot who owns it? When you forget that God owns it all is when you start really worrying about money. And if you live constantly worried about money, then you still think it's your money and not God's money. I'm taking time here because I want us to understand this because it is so foundational to how the Bible tells us to treat the money that passes through our hands. If you spend every waking moment worried about money, then you're thinking you own it, not God. Worry is a sign that you think it's yours. So when you worry about it, remind yourself, God, this is yours. You've loaned it to me. You've entrusted it to me. Let me use it wisely. Now look at the next verse. He says, to one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability, and then he went away. Now what he's talking about here are those talents. Remember I told you a talent is a measurement of money. And a Roman talent is 71 pounds of gold. Try wearing that chain around your neck. 71 pounds of gold. So I decided to look online and see what's the current cost of gold per ounce. Currently, gold is $4,135 an ounce. So if you've given 1 talent, 71 pounds of gold, then the owner entrusted you with $4.7 million. That's not a small investment. If you've got 2 talents, you got $9.4 million that the owner's entrusted to you. And if he trusted you enough to give you 5 talents, then he's trusted you enough to give you $23.5 million. And none of those are a small amount. God has made a huge investment in you. I want you to understand that. And we'll talk about that one more time at the end through the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ and the salvation that He has provided for us. God has made an investment into your life you can't put a price tag on. But you got to remember the first law, everything I have belongs to God. And that everything I have belongs to Him. So here's the second law, the law of allocation. The law of allocation. God determines who gets His money. Now, you notice in the story, everybody got a different amount. And that's obvious. We're not all as equally wealthy. We don't all have the same economic status. It says some guy gets 1 talent, some guy gets 2 talents, some guy gets 5 talents. But the point of the story is that there are no talent people. There's no talent people in the world. If you're breathing, that's a blessing. If you're alive, that's a blessing. Everybody gets something. They all begin with something. You began with something. I began with something. Everybody begins with something. And then these guys go out and they begin to do what they're going to do. Notice the next verse, right? Remember, they all start out with something. Verse 16, the man who had received 5 bags of gold went out at once and put his money to work and gained 5 bags more. Circle that. That's in the NIV if you have that Bible translation, or you can write it down. Put his money to work. We'll talk about that. Verse 17, so also he who had 2 talents made 2 talents more, but he who had received the 1 talent went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. There's a couple things I want to point out here. First is, money is a tool to be used. Did you see that? He went and put his money to work. Money is a tool to be used. Here's the principle. You use money and you love people. You use money and you love people. Because if you ever get that reversed, you're going to be in trouble. Because the moment you start loving money, you start using people. People are to be loved. Money is to be used. Don't ever get those confused. Now, he gives the money out to these 3 servants. One goes out and puts it to work. Remember, money is a tool. It's not good or bad. It's neutral. It's what you choose to do with it. He puts it to work. He goes out and he invests it. Same guy. Second guy goes out. He puts it to work. He invests it. The third guy goes out and he hides it in the ground. And here's the point. Here's the point of the law of allocation. One, God chooses who he gives and what he gives. But here's what you get to choose. You get to choose what you do with what God gives you. You don't get to choose what you're given to start out with, but you get to choose what you do with what God entrusted to you. See, some people are given 5 talents, and some people are given 2 talents, and some people are given 1 talent. It's just different amounts. But you get to choose what you do with it. And what you do with it is what God is watching. What you do with it is what God is watching. Now, when you get to heaven someday, God's not going to ask you, why weren't you more like your brother? He's not going to ask you, why weren't you more like your dad? He's not going to ask you, why weren't you more like your mother? He's not going to ask you, why weren't you more like Warren Buffett? You're only responsible for the talents that you've been given. And so if you're with me, if you're taking notes, understand this. There's going to be a day that you and I have to give account. And it's not just about money. It's not just about your time. It's not just about your abilities. It's not just about your influence. All of those things are important. It's all the things that God has given you. And when you get to heaven, God's not going to compare you to somebody else. You can't say, well, God, you didn't give me as many talents as you gave that person over there. God simply wants to know, what did you do with what he gave you? What did you do with what he loaned you? What did you do with what he entrusted into your hands? So God says, you get to choose what you do with the money God gives you. So what do we do with the money God gives us? We can waste it. We've probably all done that. You can invest it. You can spend it. You can hoard it. There's lots of ways that we can choose what to do with the money that God puts in our hands. But one day you are going to have to give an account for the reasons you chose to do what you did with what he loaned you while you were alive. You see, money is just a test. Money is just a test of your trust. And one day you're going to have to explain it. And that's why in verse 19, it says, now after a long time, the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. He came to settle accounts. This is the third financial law of the Bible. It's the law of accountability. Oh, we don't like that word, do we? It's the law of accountability. You guys are sure quiet today. Anybody, am I preaching good? Okay. One day God is going to audit me. Audit. We don't like that word, do we? One day God is going to audit me. And he's going to come to settle accounts. There's going to be a final exam on life. He's seen everything you've done. God has seen everything you've done with your time. God has seen everything you've done with your words. God has seen everything you've done with your life. God has seen everything you've done with your money. God has seen everything you've done with your influence and with the opportunities that he has given you. And one day you're going to have to give an account for your life. And God has made an investment in your life. God has made an investment that you can't put a price tag on it. God has given you abilities and opportunities and resources and intellect and intelligence and energy and life. And God's going to say, what did you do with everything that I gave you? Maybe you say, well, I made a lot of money and then I died. And that would be a wrong answer. Do you really think God put you here on earth simply to live for yourself and stockpile a bunch of wealth and stuff that you're not even going to take with you anyways when you die? He's watching to see what you and I do with what He entrusted into our hands to be a steward of. One day I'm going to have to give an account on how well I use my money, my resources, my time, and my energy. All the things that God has given me. And the Bible says in Romans chapter 14, verse 12. So then each of us will give an account of himself to God. Are you ready for that day to give an account of yourself to God? Now, it's fun to be irresponsible. Everyone's staring at me. Let me explain. Maybe when you graduated high school, there's a window of time, maybe a few months between when you graduated high school and you went to college, and maybe you're thinking, man, I can finally sleep in. I don't have to get up early in the morning. I don't have to go to school. So you're sleeping in. Like you're sleeping in till noon, and you're getting up, and you're being super lazy, really not going out to find that summer job that your parents told you to go get. And you're like, maybe tomorrow. Today's kind of busy. I'm watching cartoons and eating Cocoa Puffs on the couch. Right? I'm playing video games with my friends. Don't bother me. I'm in a match. It's what I hear often from the boys upstairs. I'm in a match. Right? It's probably fun to be irresponsible for a while, but in the end, irresponsibility catches up with you. You can't be irresponsible forever. Because the law of accountability says that one day God's going to ask you, what did you do with what He gave you? Now notice these three guys have three different responses. The first guy's got a good report. He's got a good ROI, he's got a good return on his investment. Verse 21 says, and he who had received 5 talents, remember, that's like 23 million bucks, came forward bringing 5 talents more. Imagine carrying that briefcase. Saying, Master, you delivered to me 5 talents here, I've made 5 talents more. His master said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. I would guess so. That's 100% return on investment. I mean, this guy bought Google. He invested in Amazon right from the beginning. I mean, he doubles his investment. Second guy has another good return. Verse 22, it says, and he also who had the 2 talents came forward saying, Master, you delivered to me 2 talents. Here I've made 2 talents more. And his master said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. Again, 100% return on investment. Now, the third guy doesn't have a good story to tell because he didn't use what God gave him wisely. Verse 24. It says, he also who had received the 1 talent came forward saying, Master, I knew you to be a hard man. Interesting. Pause right here. Look at this. Can you see him turning the tables? He's trying to fix the blame on his master and play the victim card here. Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here, have what's yours. His master answered him, you wicked and slothful servant. The NIV says, you wicked and lazy. Lazy. You wicked and lazy servant. Let's just tear this apart a little bit because it sounds really mean, doesn't it? But the story's in the Bible for a reason. And if it's in the Bible for a reason, I want to know, what is that reason? This guy does nothing with the talent that his master had given him. He doesn't use his talent. And then he blames his master for his own mismanagement and his own failure. He says, I'm the victim. And we have people today that feel like they're the victim. They mess up their lives. They don't make wise choices, and then they blame the government, or they blame their job, or they blame their boss, or they blame their parents, or they blame their upbringing, or they blame their ex for their bad decisions that they make. You listen, God didn't cause you to put all that stuff on your credit card at 24% interest. Don't blame God on that. Proverbs says people ruin their lives by their own foolishness and then are angry at the Lord. Let that one sink in for a little bit. People ruin their own lives by their own foolishness, and then they blame God for it. So this guy's blaming his boss for his actions. And notice the master's response to this guy's whining. Verse 27. So then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and at my coming I should have received what was my own with interest. I mean, at least put it on deposit. Make a little bit of interest instead of digging a hole and burying it in the ground and doing nothing, not even thinking about it, not even talking about it, not even acting upon it, not even sharing it, not doing nothing. So it leads us to the fourth financial law of the Bible, the law of utilization. God expects me to use what He's given me. God expects me to use what He's given me. I'm not to hoard it or sit on it or hide it. God expects me to use what He loans me. That's the problem with this third guy. He does nothing with it. He doesn't do anything with what God entrusted to him, what the master put in his hands to steward. And that's what upsets the master. That's what upsets the master. And the master says, "You wicked and lazy servant." And that seems a little strong, doesn't it? Because when I think of the word wicked, I think of like rape, murder, right? When I think of the word wicked, I think of like child abuse, sex trafficking. I mean, those things are wicked, yet the master chooses to use that word to describe the lazy servant that did nothing with what the master had entrusted him to do and to work with. So I was thinking about that. Could it be that God is saying, Jason, it's wicked anytime you misuse and abuse the resources I gave you and you don't use them wisely? That's wicked. God said doing nothing is inexcusable. And that's true with everything. Doing nothing with your talent, inexcusable. Doing nothing with your time, inexcusable. Doing nothing with the money that the Lord has put in your hands to steward, inexcusable. The master's saying, you didn't even try. You didn't even try to serve in church. You didn't even try to lead. You didn't even try to invest. You didn't even try to give. You didn't even try to tithe. You didn't even try to give you didn't even try. You didn't make any effort. You've done nothing. Now, what is Jesus saying here in this story? Why does He tell us this story? Because Jesus is trying to say, and here's the big idea. This is what I want you to write down. You can't please God with your life by doing nothing with your life. Simple as that. You can't please God with your life by doing nothing in your life. God didn't put you here on earth to do nothing. He puts you here on earth and He wants you to use your time, your money, your energy, your intelligence, your personality, all of those things for His good and to build the kingdom and to share the good news of Jesus Christ with others. Doing nothing with what God has given you is inexcusable. In fact, God would rather you have tried and failed at it than to succeed at doing nothing. Because to succeed at doing nothing means you did nothing with what God gave you. And God wants you to learn to live by faith. So we come to the next principle in verse 28. And the master says, so take the talent from him, the guy with the one that buried it, and give it to him who has 10 talents. You're probably reading that and maybe you're thinking, whoa, how unfair is that? You're giving the guy who's got a lot even more? Yep. The story that Jesus is telling in this parable continues. And here's the truth. For to everyone who has will be given more, and he will have an abundance. From the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. Here's the final financial law of the Bible I want to share with you today. It's called the law of application. The law of application. If I don't use it, I lose it. That's the principle of the universe. Don't roll your eyes at me. That's the principle of the universe. If you refuse to exercise, guess what? You're going to lose muscle. If you refuse to think and use your brain, then guess what? Your mind goes dull. If you refuse to practice, then you lose the ability for athletics or music. And God has the right to take away anything that I don't use to invest for Him. Why? Because it's all His in the first place. He owns it, not me. And on the flip side of that principle, if I do use it wisely, God gives me more. Whatever you need more of, listen to me, whatever you need more of, give the little of what you have to God. You need more time? Give God the little bit of time you have. You need more energy? Give God the little bit of caffeinated energy that you have. You need more wisdom? Give God your thoughts and ask Him to renew your way of thinking. You need more money? Give God the money He's entrusted you with. That's what He blesses. Whatever you sow, you will reap. It's the law of the harvest. When you sow a seed, you don't get one seed back, you get exponentially more. If I had a kernel of corn and I planted it in my backyard and a stalk of corn sprouted, I don't get one kernel, I don't get one for one. On that stalk, I get, I call it a cob, right? I get hundreds of kernels of corn. It's the law of seed time and harvest. So finishing the story today, take a look at the rewards that God gives for those who steward wisely. Verse 21, he says this, his master said to him, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter the joy of your master." Well done, good and faithful servant. That's the first reward. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Second reward. Enter into the joy of your master. That's the third reward. Write these three words down. Write these three words down. We're closing up. Affirmation, promotion, celebration. Affirmation. It's the first reward. God says, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Man, I remember as a kid just wanting to hear my dad say, "Good job, son." Man, we might have lost the soccer game, but I wanted my dad to say, "At least you ran. Good job running. You didn't fall down." Right? I just thrived on my dad saying, "You did good, son." That's the first reward. God says, "Good job, boy. That's my girl. You passed the test. I was testing you, and you passed the test. I wanted to see if you could be trusted with a little bit. And boy, you surprised me. Now I'm going to trust you with a little bit more. You've been faithful with a few things. I'll put you in charge of much." That's the second reward, promotion. Now there's a greater responsibility. And then come and share in the joy. That's the third reward, is celebration. As we get ready to close today, I hope you took a lot of notes. I hope you understand that the Bible has a lot to say about money. So if you find yourself always in financial stress, if money is a source of contention in your home, if you find yourself always worried about money, remember we said worry is a mark of maybe you thinking you own it rather than God. If most of your fights and disagreements and a root cause is money and how to spend money, let me encourage you, don't miss a Sunday through the month of November as we walk through Jesus on money and we learn the financial laws of the Bible. You see, at its core, money is the acid test of how much we trust God. And that's where we're going to just kind of slowly walk through this. If you're in debt, I want to help you learn keys to get out of debt. Not because I want you to spend more, but because I want you to trust God more. I want you to trust God more. So let me just close today by asking you this question. If God did an audit of your life today, if God did an audit on your finances, what He loaned you, what He's entrusted into your hands to steward, would you get an A? Would you get a B? Would you get a C plus? Or are you failing the course? See, my goal is to move you up the scale over the next few weeks, because at its core, it's a lesson on trust, and it's an eternal issue. So as your pastor, I'm wanting God's best for you, and I'm wanting you to learn to trust and to live by faith. More than anything else, I want you to be who God wants you to be. I invite you to bow your head and close your eyes with me for just a moment.